Dalton, Riley, Wolves and Wagers. We're just going to do a little short intro on the last couple games, Rye. I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, I haven't talked about the Wolves much since they beat Memphis on the road. Their last three games, though, all wins. They got 4 wins in a row now. After they lost to that Kings, they started a new win streak, so we love that. We'll start with the Thunder game on November 28th. 3-point win. That was an in-season tournament game. The Wolves didn't make the tournament, which is fine. Not too big of a deal. Anthony Edwards did get hurt in that game. I think that was the big headline. Thankful it was great news, just that hip pointer. And with some weaker opponents, they were able to buy him a few days rest. I do think he'll be back against the Spurs on Wednesday. I think they have 3 full days off. They don't play until Wednesday, so that's nice. I do think and expect him to be back. But even if they decided to rest him against the Spurs on that day, I wouldn't hate that either. You just want him fully healthy because they do have a tough stretch of December games coming up. But we'll talk about the Thunder game a little bit more. To me, outside of the Ant injury, a big headliner for that was Troy Brown Jr. stepping up, because that was a game that Cat struggled in. I think he was only 2 of 8 from the floor. Now, he did play well against the Jazz and Hornets, but he struggled that game, and Troy Brown Jr. came through with 17 big points to step up, hitting deep threes. It was just kind of a crazy game.
Yeah, and when you kind of look at our power rankings, this was a top 5 clash, even I think at that time. I mean, OKC, 11-6, Timberwolves, 13-4. I mean, this was a big matchup, and to come away with a win like that, obviously the injury news was pretty scary. I thought it was a lot worse, and luckily it wasn't. And hopefully he can play against the Spurs. But I still think when you look at kind of Naz and Rudy, and I'm sure we'll talk about them more in kind of the latest matchup, when they play really good basketball, this team is tough to beat. And when they can play consistent basketball, I think this is a top 4 team in the West. And the West is absolutely loaded, right?
Yeah, it is. It's insane. This Thunder Wolves matchup was a 1-2 matchup at that time. I know the Thunder have dropped now, have remained first. So stellar game. It was really fun to watch. Pulled away with the win, even though Ant didn't play in that fourth quarter. That shows to the resiliency this team has this year compared to years past. So I really do think this is a different Timberwolves team than what we've seen before. So we're going to soak up every moment of this. We won't touch too much on the Jazz game. Cat played really well. He had 28, 7, and 5. Or no, he had 32, 11, and 4. That stat line was against the Hornets, the first one I said. But he had a nice little revenge game against the Jazz. He was getting DNPs when he was traded to the Wolves. So he took it personal. What a game. I mean, 20 points, 7 assists, 5 rebounds, 5 steals, and 2 blocks. I mean, you talk about a stat stuffer. So what a game by Non, his little revenge game. But that's all I have for the Jazz one.
Yeah, and I think when you kind of look at you look at Troy Brown Jr., you look at Shake Milton, Kyle Anderson, like at least one of them has to play and have an above average performance. And in this game, it was Nickeil Alexander-Walker, that plain simple. When I went back and rewatched this the next morning, I mean, he was unbelievable. I mean, he almost looked like his relative SGA. And if we can get that even during a little bit of a stretch, and then if we can get Jake and we can get Troy Brown Jr., we can get Kyle playing more consistent, I think it's going to be awesome. But yeah, nothing more on the Utah Jazz matchup, Brian.
And then yesterday, the Hornets game, I thought they were going to lose that. I really did. When they went down 4, I was like, man, still a bad loss, but it's like you've played a lot of games in a short amount of days. You've only had 1 day off. You're on the road again now. You're missing Ant. You're missing Jayden. Like, I just thought they were going to lose. Rudy was questionable going into that game, and he had played a lot of minutes. And he played fantastic. I think he had 26 and 12 or something like that. But they ended up winning. They ended up pulling it off. Cat had some big clutch buckets. Like I said, 28, 7, and 5. That's a pretty good stat line. Very efficient again, over 50% from the floor. So they pulled it off, which I'm happy about, obviously, and whatnot. But I'll kick it over to you if you have anything else to talk about that game, because I don't think I do.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, going on that little run and Mike not hitting that 3 and having a 6-point swing. And I know exactly what you're talking about when they fell down by 4. That was right around that time. But Mike Conley coming through at the end 1. He's been playing good basketball. He had a double-double tonight. And then you look at some of the guys I just talked about. Kyle Anderson wasn't anything crazy. I think he actually fell on his hip too. And I think Rudy has the hip problems. Ant has some hip problems. Kyle has some hip problems. The boys got to get that figured out here for the regular season, so that's not a problem. But that's about it on my side. And I know you kind of want to touch on maybe Milton and his inconsistencies because we need him to play better, right?
Yeah, the two negative things I did have wrote down here in my notebook from the last two games was Shake's continued struggles. Long term, I guess I'm not super worried about it just because of his track record, but it's becoming a problem. And the Kyle Anderson,
Yes.
he's kind of right there with Shake for me right now as far as how they're playing. They're not positives when they're on the floor. Now, Kyle did play a bit better against the Hornets yesterday, which was good to see.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I mean, the shooting splits are still not great. The plus minuses, it's still not great. Like when you look at the advanced metrics, it's just not good basketball right now. And those are two guys who were going to be arguably the best two pieces off their bench right there with Nas and Na. And they're not really contributing much at all. But like you said, you have to have at least one of those guys show up. And when they're not doing that, it really hurts because it puts a ton of pressure on Nas. It puts a ton of pressure on Na. And thankfully, Nas did come to play. He had 23 points himself.
Mm-hmm.
Big three centers. I mean, kind of carried the low against the Hornets. I mean, you talk about 23 for Nas, 26 for Rudy, 28 for Cat. Like, that's a lot of points for three centers making a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this roster, Tim constructed, obviously, cashing in on the centers, in a game like this, but also something that I wasn't worried about, Rye, coming into the season and even early on, and this, is the bench. But now it's starting to become a concern. We're almost 20 games into the season. Like, you have to start taking into account how they're playing this season. Milton, you can go show me all those 30-point performances against Philadelphia all you want, but he has not sniffed that in a Timberwolves uniform. And until he shows differently, we're going to have to keep expecting this. And if he keeps playing like this, Nickeil Alexander-Walker is going to have to step up. Kyle Anderson, like, come on, dude. You were one of the least guys I was worried about day in and day out on this roster. And he has just had inconsistencies. And maybe it is because of the contract side of things, but you have to be able to put that behind you and be a really valuable piece on a contending team. You guys are number one in the West right now. Shake Milton and Kyle Anderson need to play better on this playoff roster, right?
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's just that plain and simple. They do when they struggle. It also puts, especially from Shake's side of things, it puts a lot of pressure on Ant and Cat because those are your two big scorers. And if they don't have them, they need a breather, because they're playing a ton of minutes and they need to come out and get a quick puff. It's tough to not have a scorer out there, and maybe they got to come in a minute or two before Finch would like to have him in there just because they need to score. That's why I think when Jaden is back, his usage needs to go up because he's a very efficient player, and he hasn't been able to showcase really what his bag consists of. And I think Finch understands that now, that he's going to have to let Jaden go get some buckets because for as good as Mike Conley is and has been, at this point in his career, it's best for him to just shoot threes and table set. And when he's got to go try and create his own shot, this team could be in a lot of problems at this day and age for Mike Conley being relied to do that. So at the end of the day, just like we said, you got to play better, Shake. You got to play better, Kyle. I think they will. They're veterans. It's not like they're rookies that's struggling and are busts or whatnot. So they'll figure it out. But as a whole, we wanted to talk about the whole month of November, 13-2. Best month in franchise history, probably by far. I mean, this franchise hasn't had a lot of positives in their heyday. But start at the beginning of the month with two big wins. Third game of the month, beat the Celtics at home. Electric game. Anthony Edwards, that overtime was just something special. I know we did an episode on that, and we have to talk about that again. But also the first game of the month was against the Nuggets. You kind of blew out the Nuggets, which in a lot of people think is the best or second best team in the entire league.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at the schedule, and some of my favorite takes is, even Golden State going in there and beating them twice in that span is something that this franchise, even back when like Baron Davis was on Golden State, the Timberwolves were just not competing whatsoever, especially through this dynasty run. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was talks about trading Kevin Love to Golden State to help improve Golden State. So to see that, in the middle of the month, I think just carried a lot of momentum. And I think you got to touch on that Knicks game because I think that's looking like a really, really good dub, Rye. But yeah, I'll let you continue on some of the big moments throughout the month.
Yeah, the Knicks for sure it was at the Target Center, so you had a little bit of an advantage there. But I think that was the game where Jaden only played 4 minutes. I think that was the game he got hurt. So you're still able to beat the Knicks without your best perimeter defender, who I was really excited to shadow Jalen Brunson the whole game. It shows how deep this roster can be, especially on the defensive side of things. And I think that's what good teams are made up of. It's, hey, we don't need to outscore you, because that's when you get into trouble when shots aren't falling. They hang their hat on the defensive end and say, you know what, we're going to dig in. And if we get to 110 points, we're more than likely going to win. So, yeah, like you said, that Knicks game, they've handled the Pelicans with ease. Now, I know the Pelicans haven't been at full strength either of those games. Ingram had a winner opportunity. I can't remember if that was home or away. I think that was at home. But regardless, I mean, those are good wins against a team who's playing some really good ball as of late and is climbing the standings. So you can go up and down. There's not a lot of gimmies or take for granted like dubs. And when there was, they took advantage and got the job done.
Yeah, and you look at their 2 losses. Wow, that's crazy to think in a whole entire month they only had 2 stinking losses for the Minnesota Timber Pups. Was on the road in Phoenix with D-Book coming back, and they rested him a lot longer than they probably needed to. It's early on in the season. You know they're going to take advantage of him having a little twisted up ankle, and he's sitting, and they were probably eyeing this home against the Timber Pups as the matchup. So he was ready to go. And then you look at against Sacramento. We always talk about Sacramento. Yes, are they number 7 in the West right now? But they could easily be number 3 in a month. Like, they got that type of talent. So for those to be your only 2 losses, and then to have all these games where we were like, this could be 50-50. Dub, 13 dubs in a month. Absolutely historical season for the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Yeah, it's outstanding. I mean, if you would have told us, about a quarter of the way through the season, give or take, that the Timberwolves be 15-4, they'd win 13 games in November with only 2 losses, we probably wouldn't even believe you. And we're 2 of the biggest Timberwolves believers out there. So that just shows how good of a season it's been. But they'll have some more tests coming up, because I'm looking at the schedule right now. You got the Spurs on Wednesday, which we've touched on. Then you got the Grizzlies on Friday. But then the schedule gets really tough after that. So you're hoping you can win those 2 games. You start with the Pelicans on the 11th. Then you got the Mavericks on the 14th. Then it's the Pacers. Then it's the Heat. Then it's the Sixers. Then it's the Lakers. Then it's the Kings, the Thunder, the Mavs, and the Lakers. Oh, I got to take a breath. I mean, that's a lot of tough basketball games there, where you would hope to go at least 500. But from what we've seen this year, I'm almost expecting them to go and win 65% of those games. And we would be ecstatic with that, because that's a lot of tough games there.
Yeah, and I'm hoping a lot of these games get flexed to national television, because I don't know why they wouldn't. You look at Minnesota traveling to Dallas Thursday night. How is that not a nationally televised game after Mark Cuban just sold, his majority stake for the Mavs? And you look up and down, the Lakers twice in that. I mean, at Madison Square Garden. Like, I don't know if these are games. Maybe they are. I haven't looked ahead at where the TV schedule is. But I mean, hopefully the Timber Pups can walk away with some dubs. But I'm looking on the road at OKC, on the road at Sacramento, on the road at Philadelphia, on the road in Dallas, on the road in Miami. All road games. Hopefully Ant can get healthy. I'm looking forward to the matchup against Wemby. I think we won't do much of a preview for the Spurs, but you got much kind of talking about Ant and kind of my thought process, Rye. I don't know about you, but I kind of look at these next 3 games as games that we could win without Anthony Edwards. And then maybe that Dallas game could be a good time for him to really come back, be healthy from that hip. Because building up this 15-4 record, I think, provides some of that. But I know you're kind of more in, and I know Anthony Edwards, he wants to play games. So I don't know if you want to touch on that a little bit as well.
Yeah, it's kind of tough to say what would be best, because at some point you just got to go out there, and what would be best is to play, right? And now I'm thinking he's probably going to be close to doing some 5-on-5 work. I don't know how much he's practiced over the last few days, but I would think he'd want to go out there and loosen that hip up. But yeah, I agree. Maybe especially the next 2 against the Spurs and Grizzlies.
Yes.
I think you can win those games and say, you go to Ant and say, hey, we know you're chomping at the bit to play, and you definitely could, but we're just going to sit you out of those. We're going to let you practice with us. We're going to let you do whatever you want to do, like, outside of the games, just so you can get loose and get ready and back into game action, stay in shape, stuff like that. But we just don't think we feel the need to push you right now. And then we're going to have you fully healthy, fully healthy for this tough December stretch. So maybe that's the pitch to Ant. But ultimately, I think they will leave it up to him and say, hey, if you're healthy, we'll let you play. But I think it would probably be best if he sits at least the next against the Spurs, even though he's had a lot of days off in a row. But maybe you just say, hey, sit these next two out, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so we're going to try and post an episode every day during this stretch of December throughout the holidays. So stay tuned. Appreciate you guys as always.